The United Nations has been accused by Israel of an institutional bias against it, especially among its bodies that deal with human rights. But there's been a surprising development in one of those, the UN Human Rights Committee, which for the first time has chosen as its chair an Israeli. Professor Yuval Shany is deputy president of the Israel Democracy Institute and a Hebrew University law professor, and he was unanimously selected by all 18 members of that committee. He joins us now from Geneva. Yuval, thanks very much for being with us. Tell us, first of all, a little bit about what you see as the significance of this role that you're stepping into.
Well, the committee, good evening. The committee is a very important institution because it's an institution that monitors human rights around 171 countries. In doing so, it not only promotes human rights in the world, it also, in a way, helps steer the direction in which human rights are being understood in the world. And as the chairperson of the committee, I'm able both to work within the committee so as to make the committee a more effective institution, but also to help shape the normative agenda in which the committee will proceed.
Professor Shany, just to clarify, this is not the Human Rights Council that has been in the news quite a bit lately, also based there in Geneva. Of course, that body, the United States recently pulled out of, citing, among other things, its anti-Israel bias. So let me just ask you, that raises the question, is it better to try to work from within, as you're trying to do, or in some cases pull out, as the U.S. did from the Human Rights Council?
Well, of course, the Human Rights Council and the Human Rights Committee are very two different animals. I mean, the Council is a political institution which is being, it comprises of states. And it engages in some, I should say that the Council also has some, during the years, has made some important decisions in human rights, but it is a very political body and it does apply the law selectively. And the decision whether you want to change from the inside or try to, in a way, shake the boat by stepping out and try to basically apply some pressure is really something that has to be decided on a case-by-case basis. And we can discuss this. The committee is a very different thing. It's a professional setting. High politics do not play a role in the committee, and there is really no downside for any state, certainly for Israel, to become involved in the work of such a professional body. And indeed, Israel has worked very hard to get me elected to that body to begin with. And I'm not the first who has served on UN treaty bodies that monitor human rights compliance, although I am the first president of such a body.
Do you have any concerns that you're being an Israeli, pure and simple, in a reality that is so political, whether it's within the Human Rights Council or outside of it, could actually affect your work as part of a UN body?
I think everyone who follows the work of the treaty bodies, and especially of the Human Rights Committee, which is a very established and well-recognized institution, knows that it is manned by independent experts. And I think people in this field are sophisticated enough to draw the distinction between the Council and the committee, and between the work of an independent expert who comes to the position with a solid record of expertise in the field. So I don't think this is going to play out in a significant manner.
Yuval, your committee, of course, as you explained, it has a very specific purpose. But I simply wonder, as an Israeli in that environment, do you get caught up in discussions or debates about, for example, Israeli policies regarding the Gaza Strip, as we've seen over the last few months?
I mean, it's quite rare. I mean, of course, people talk and we do exchange some concerns, and also we do sometimes consult each other. I mean, members have a lot of expertise. Some of the challenges that Israel is confronting are very complicated, and I sometimes discuss this with colleagues who try to get and understand what would be their perspective. And we do the same thing with regard to situation in other areas. So I don't feel that being an Israeli on our committee is a major issue or a major topic of discussion. So it's certainly, in a way, it's somewhat of a bubble.
Let's speak a little practically about that issue, about the Gaza Strip. Obviously, there's a humanitarian crisis there brewing for many years, and a lot of warnings, even from some Israeli security officials, certainly from the Arab world, even from the United States, of an area really on the brink of collapse. Are there any concrete recommendations coming out of that committee on what should happen and really who should take responsibility to alleviate the crisis?
Well, I think that the Human Rights Committee is monitoring both the human rights record of Israel, but also it will look into the human rights records of the Palestinians in due course. And the position would be that both parties should play a constructive role in alleviating actual suffering. So the committee has in the past urged Israel to consider alleviating the blockade or the travel restrictions into Gaza. And I'm sure that when the Palestinians come before the committee is going to be critical about aspects of Palestinian policy that have adverse consequences in Gaza, such as, for instance, the determination of the Palestinian Authority to use electricity or payment of salaries as a leverage point to pressurize the local population in Gaza.
Let's look, Yuval, away from Israel to another area in the Middle East, which is really, certainly in terms of scale, even much greater in terms of its humanitarian impact, and that's the situation in Syria. From your view, and the UN has been trying in several of its bodies to deal with the situation there, I mean, what do you see practically in terms of either your committee or elsewhere in the UN can do?
I think actually at this point in time, our committee cannot, our ability to influence a country like Syria is almost non-existent. I mean, you need some minimal conditions in place in order to, we conduct dialogues with governments that have some control over their territory and some interest in promoting human rights. I don't think that these conditions are there currently in Syria. There are other bodies within the UN system, actually some bodies working very close to us, the next door virtually, that do conduct investigations into the situations in Syria and are collecting evidence with a view to prosecuting some of those most responsible for the atrocities there. Ultimately, this has to be a situation where high politics at the Security Council level is infused by human rights and other interests that would apply some pressure on the actors and introduce some stability that would enable bodies like ourselves to play a more conductive role. But I'm afraid that this is a situation that is beyond our capacity to help, very unfortunately.
All right. Professor Yuval Shany in Geneva, thanks very much for being with us, and good luck in the new role.